Imagine reaching the absolute pinnacle of your global career, having millions of eyes tracking your every single move, and then deliberately plunging yourself into total darkness without a word of explanation. We begin our special investigative report tonight by looking into a disappearance that completely baffled the highest levels of the entertainment world. For years, the international audience watched the barefoot prodigy, Jordan, grow into a vocal titan. She was widely considered by industry insiders to be the ultimate prize, seemingly destined to rule the modern pop landscape under the banner of a massive corporate label. But as 2026 rolled in, the unthinkable occurred. The young star completely vanished from the public eye. There were absolutely no new musical releases, zero public appearances, and an eerie, deafening quiet that left both her loyal and seasoned record executives completely in the dark. The mainstream entertainment media immediately tried to spin this absence as a simple, routine hiatus, or perhaps a strategic contract dispute with her former major labels. Record executives whispered that she was holding out for a better financial deal. However, as our investigation into this timeline reveals, the reality behind this sudden and total disappearance was far darker, heavily layered, and infinitely more complex than anyone in the press initially realized. She wasn't just taking a break from the recording studio. She was actively stepping away from the only life she had known since childhood. As a journalist covering the shifting tides of the music industry, witnessing a rising star voluntarily step off the map at the exact moment of her greatest leverage is incredibly rare. It immediately signaled to our team that something profound and potentially dangerous was occurring behind the scenes, far away from the flashing cameras. The true cost of global fame rarely makes it onto the glossy magazine covers, especially when the intense spotlight begins to attract terrifying, unseen shadows. Just as she was bravely breaking away from the corporate machine to form her own independent path, deeply concerning warnings began to surface behind closed doors. Sources close to her inner circle indicated that her intense, relentless global exposure had unfortunately attracted an incredibly unstable and highly dangerous element. The situation reportedly escalated so rapidly that severe, real-world safety protocols had to be immediately enacted by her management team. This was no longer about managing a public image. It was a matter of basic human safety. Her security personnel were forced to drastically tighten her inner circle, completely pulling her out of the public eye to ensure her physical well-being. It wasn't a strategic public relations choice or a clever marketing gimmick to build anticipation for a new album. It was a desperate, urgent necessity to protect her family from a legitimate threat. For a young woman who had spent her entire adolescence, her soul with the world, being forced into isolation must have been an incredibly jarring transition. When the cameras stop rolling, the reality of being a high-profile target sets in, and the psychological toll of constantly looking over your shoulder cannot be overstated. As reporters, we often see the glamorous side of international tour and award shows, but we rarely see the armored vehicles and the heavy security details required to keep these young artists safe. Just as her team finally managed to secure a safe perimeter around her, an entirely different kind of nightmare was brewing on the horizon, proving that sometimes you simply cannot control the environment around you. Sometimes the universe tests a person on multiple fronts at the exact same time, and while she was navigating intense personal threats, her local world literally caught fire. As if the severe security lockdowns were not enough to break a person's spirit, a massive environmental disaster struck at the absolute worst possible moment. Devastating, uncontrollable wildfires swept through her region in Los Angeles, California, turning the skies to ash and violently disrupting her community. The sheer stress of potential displacement, combined with the heavy, ongoing burden of a strict security crisis, created an incredibly toxic and terrifying environment. The barefoot singer, widely known for her deep spiritual connection to nature and the earth, was forced to watch her immediate surroundings burn. This extreme environmental trauma forced an even deeper retreat from the public stage, pushing her further into what industry insiders now grimly refer to as her silent exile. When your physical safety is threatened by both human elements and natural disasters simultaneously, the concept of writing pop songs or entertaining the masses understandably vanishes. Our reporting confirms that this period was marked by profound anxiety and a frantic scramble to ensure the safety of her loved ones and her home. The compounding trauma of these two massive events running parallel to each other would be enough to permanently derail the careers of artists with twice her experience. She was completely cut off from her normal creative outlets, trapped in a highly volatile situation where every single day brought a new, unpredictable challenge. But while she fought privately to keep her loved ones safe from the literal flames, the internet decided to create its own incredibly toxic digital blaze. A complete vacuum of information is a very dangerous thing in the modern digital age, and the relentless online mill wasted absolutely no time filling the empty void. While was completely off the grid, actively dealing with severe real-world crises, a massive tsunami of artificial misinformation began to flood online platforms. Because she was completely silent, opportunistic content creators and anonymous online accounts seized the opportunity to hijack her narrative. Fabricated, digital-generated videos and wild speculations went incredibly viral, falsely claiming she had suffered a total mental collapse, lost her voice, or had permanently walked away from the music industry in complete and utter defeat. Millions of her loyal fans were left completely in the dark, watching an agonizing digital smear campaign attempt to rewrite her reality in real time. As a news correspondent, I can confirm that combating fake news is incredibly difficult under normal circumstances, but it is virtually impossible when the subject is completely unreachable. Because of her strict, highly confidential security protocols, she was entirely unable to log online and defend herself without potentially compromising her carefully guarded location. She was forced to watch in absolute silence as tabloids and social media algorithms profited off of her sudden disappearance. It was a vicious cycle of exploitation that highlights the darkest aspects of modern fame. The very platforms that initially helped launch her into global superstardom were now actively being used to tear down her legacy while she was completely. Yet the most painful betrayal during this incredibly dark period didn't just come from anonymous online trolls. It came from a very official source. While she was completely off the grid fighting for just a single moment of peace, a massive, government-backed broadcasting institution from her own homeland decided to strike. In a staggering display of incredibly bad timing and corporate aggression, she became deeply entangled in a bitter, highly publicized legal standoff with the Norwegian national broadcaster. NRK. They aggressively demanded over 130,000 Norwegian kroner, which translates to roughly 11,000 American dollars, in financial compensation following her abrupt, necessary withdrawal from the Grand. It was a cold, highly calculated move by a powerful entity, demanding capital from a young artist who was actively navigating a multi-layered, terrifying life crisis. Instead of offering support or understanding regarding her severe security warnings, they tried to squeeze her financially and publicly shame her for stepping away. For months, they attempted to force a collection, setting strict deadlines and turning up the heat on the 20-year-old vocalist while she was at her most vulnerable. Our investigative team reviewed the timeline, and the optics of a massive network bullying an independent artist experiencing a severe personal emergency are absolutely shocking. However, her legal team fiercely defended her position, pointing out that formal agreements were never fully executed and citing extreme extenuating circumstances. Eventually, the network backed down and dropped the case, but the emotional damage was already done. But instead of breaking her spirit, this relentless, multi-directional pressure from stalkers, natural disasters, internet trolls, and corporate executives finally triggered an incredible awakening. When the outside world becomes unbearably loud and physically dangerous, sometimes the absolute only safe place left for a true artist to go is deeply inward. Locked away in her quiet exile, didn't break down under the immense pressure. She completely rebuilt herself from the ground up. She deliberately turned to the one thing the corporate music industry, the aggressive tabloids, and the institutional broadcasters couldn't possibly touch: her own family's rich heritage. Diving deep into the brilliant, private journals and poetry of her grandmother, she found the exact emotional anchor she desperately needed to survive the chaos. Those beautifully written, historical words became the exact blueprint for her massive, unprecedented comeback. She began secretly recording what would become her legendary 2026 album project, Secret of Love, pouring every single ounce of her recent trauma, fear, and eventual triumph directly into the microphone. The heartbreaking truth behind her 2026 silence is that it was never a surrender. It was a highly necessary chrysalis. By enduring terrifying security issues, devastating environmental disasters, and brutal institutional betrayal, she forged an ironclad resilience that major label money simply cannot buy. She emerged from the shadows not as a manufactured pop star seeking validation, but as the untouchable, unstoppable force behind her new independent empire. She proved to the world that sometimes you have to completely disappear to find out exactly who you are. The girl who vanished into the dark came back carrying the fire, and the entire global music industry will never be the same again.